Good morning, everyone. Good Sunday morning. My name is Dr. Robert Groysman with covidinstitute.org. Wanted to remind you that I am not able to diagnose you or recommend treatments in a public forum such as this. If you like that, just contact my website or contact my office, and I'll be happy to help you. What I wanted to start with is why I don't rely on just symptoms and why I use triggers to guide my treatments. And the main reason is because each symptom can be caused by multiple mechanisms, multiple root causes. Let's take a common one such as brain fog. How do you treat it? Are you going to throw LDN in it? Are you going to throw an antihistamine at it? Are you going to throw a supplement at it? What are you exactly treating? Well, you're trying to treat brain fog, but you're really not. It really depends on what's causing the brain fog. So, a few things that I've come to become aware with long COVID is that it's a multi-mechanism disease, multi-cause disease. No one mechanism is going to explain long COVID. Okay, so let's look at brain fog. Well, what if dysautonomia is causing it? Dysautonomia would cause hypoperfusion. That is, the blood flow is directed to areas that are necessary for survival in your brain, and therefore you may get brain fog from that. Mitochondrial dysfunction. Again, mitochondria make ATP, which is our energy currency. What if you don't have enough ATP to do neuronal processing? That is very energy dependent and intensive. What about your gut dysbiosis? Well, you can have neuroinflammation caused by LPS, lipopolysaccharide. That's a toxin that comes off of gram-negative bacterial walls. It can make its way into the bloodstream and then into your brain through the blood-brain barrier, as an example. What about histamine? Well, histamine can promote neuroinflammation, endothelial dysfunction, and microclots. Again, this would be an oxygen or nutrient delivery problem, completely different from the other mechanisms. And lastly, let's look at hormone imbalance, being low in cortisol, having thyroid deficiency, low testosterone, low estrogen. All of these can have an effect on your brain and cause brain fog. So when asking, how do you treat brain fog? Well, first you have to know what you're treating. Not just pick a random supplement or medication, but figure out what the triggers are first, determine the mechanisms involved, and then treat that. That is the way I come up with the solutions for long COVID. Now, we had a couple of questions come up while I wait for some questions to come in. I know it's a little early. There was a question posted in the last Q&A I did, and it was about MCAS, which is mast cell activation syndrome, and also about probiotics. How do you safely take probiotics? Some people get worse with even taking low histamine probiotics. So that's the first question, right? Are you taking probiotics that are low histamine or break down histamine? Okay, so that's the first question. Some fermented products, which are normally great for your gut, are not so good when you have MCAS, mast cell activation, or if you have histamine excess. So let's look at what happens when you take a probiotic. So it goes through your gut, and what you ideally want is for it to seed or become part of your flora in your large intestine. Not in your small intestine, not in your stomach, but in your large intestine. So let's say it actually makes its way into the large intestine and survives the acid of the stomach, and it has to make an area its home. So it may often have to displace something, right? It may have to displace another species, whether it's pathologic or some other commensal species. It has to establish itself. When it does that, it can kill off some bacteria, and that can lead to potential toxins spilling over. And if you have leaky gut to boot, that can cause worsening of your symptoms. Some of the probiotic species can produce D-lactate. It's different from L-lactate that we make as humans, but it is a product of fermentation from sugars, from carbohydrates, and that can cause symptoms such as brain fog and other symptoms to become worse, especially after eating carbohydrates. The probiotic may not make it all the way to your large intestine. It may get stuck in your small intestine and seed there. And you can get what's called SIBO, or small intestine bowel overgrowth, bacteria overgrowth syndrome. So those are some of the ways that, even though you're taking a probiotic for a good thing, it may end up not working the way you think it would and actually make your symptoms worse after you take them. Another question I want to address is NDPH, or um, new daily headaches that can sometimes occur with long COVID. Now, these headaches are often described as pressure type headaches, squeezing type headaches. And once you start getting the headache, it's usually quick onset. It doesn't typically go away. It lasts through the day. It goes through the night, and it lasts for days and weeks and even months sometimes. So these headaches are associated with long COVID. It is associated with neuroinflammation, and one system that has been shown to help with this is the EAT therapy, and that's because it removes the inflammation from the upper airway and the nose and throat area. Okay, so let's see here. I'm starting to get some questions coming in. Uh, uh, Fez called. I'm not going to post your question, but again, I've explained it to you a few times in several different comments that I don't know what you mean by fever or fever feeling in your legs. No matter how many times you say the same thing, I don't understand what you're trying to ask me. I don't know what fever in your legs means. So unfortunately, I don't know really how to answer that question, since I don't know really what you're asking. So here's a question from Sim, and it's a question about PTSD, and he or she is asking, or them, um, asking about a left-sided one. I'm assuming a stellar ganglion procedure. So the side is really not specific to what actually helps with PTSD. And yes, it is about stored trauma. Some people respond better to the right side, some people respond better to the left side. You have an amygdala located in the temporal region of your brain on both sides of your head, and on both sides of your brain. And some of the memories are stored on one side, some of the memories are stored on the other. These are traumatic memories, okay? And the amygdala is responsible for kind of playing through those stored traumatic memories. So I don't really have a side to recommend. It's whatever side that works best for you. So that's the best way I can answer I can answer the question. So let me take a look and see what else I have going on while I have some additional questions coming in. So kind of going back to the MCAS and the probiotic thing, some of the species that you choose makes a difference, okay? Some of them will tend to colonize the small bowel more likely than the large bowel. For instance, some of the lactobacillus species, like the rhamnosus, for instance, or planarium, they can colonize the small bowel just as well as they can colonize the large intestine. Okay, so if we're concerned about SIBO, we want to choose ones that are less likely to colonize the small bowel. Okay, such as the bifidobacterium species tend to really avoid the small bowel altogether and tend to go into the large intestine. You can also choose, of course, the spore-based ones, like the bacillus, that are dirt or soil-based, spore-based. They tend to go through the entire gut into the long until the colon or the large intestine before colonizing. Okay, and one way you can test this is using a single species at a time. Okay, don't get these probiotics that have multiple species in there at the same time. Use one at a time. You can get brands that only have one. Okay, that's one way to kind of test out and see what works and what doesn't. Why some is making you worse or not. And sometimes you can be on a probiotic for a year or even a year and a half, and you still would not colonize the large intestine. And that's been shown and proven. You can test the stool, and sure enough, the species is gone. The species you've been taking for a year and a half is nowhere near to be found 2 weeks after you stop taking it. So it's tricky. You have to create the right environment for your gut, and you have to feed the probiotic species without causing problems with SIBO, without causing issues with toxin spillover, without all these other problems kind of creeping in. So that's basically what I have for MCAS and a leaky gut and probiotic replacement. If you guys have any questions or any more questions about that, I can certainly talk more about that. While I wait for some questions to come in, I can talk to you guys about one of my new hypotheses that I'm looking at. This is going to be what's called fragile mitophagy and lysosomal dysfunction. So what I'm looking at right now is both COVID and the COVID vaccines basically damaging the lysosomes or causing some lysosomal dysfunction in the cells. And this not only causes, for instance, spike protein to accumulate inside these lysosomes because they cannot be degraded. What happens is the dysfunction in the lysosome, which is kind of like little stomachs inside cells, needs to be able to break down whatever it grabs or phagocytosis inside it. And if there's not enough acid or enzymes in there, it will not break it down, and you can have things like spike protein fragments or entire spike protein basically accumulating. And you can also have mitochondria accumulating, damaged mitochondria that need to be recycled. That's what mitophagy is. Or we need to recycle the entire cell, which is autophagy. And I think that both the infection and the COVID vaccine can cause a dysfunction in this, and these cells and the mitochondria and the spike tend to accumulate intracellular, inside cells, okay? They are not sitting inside your bloodstream. They're not circulating around your bloodstream. They are inside cells, okay? So what I'm looking at is improving lysosomal function and improving mitophagy in a safe way. So the other problem that happens is you have what's called fragile mitophagy. This is a term I coined. And basically, what that means is that they're really fragile, the mitochondria. And if you try to push the mitophagy faster or harder, the mitochondria tend to burst, the lysosomes tend to burst, and they will spill their contents into the cytoplasm of the cell, and that can start another inflammatory cycle. Um, for instance, using the C-gas sting pathway, which can sense double-stranded DNA, which mitochondria have, and that can prolong uh, prolong long COVID essentially. Um, so, well, I'm still waiting on questions. I'm going to give it another 5 minutes, and I suppose if we don't have any questions coming in, we'll cut it short. Um, Nippy, I'm not sure if you have a question you're asking or not. So if you have a question, please form it in a question form, kind of like Jeopardy. And I'll try my best to answer it. Looks like we're going to have a really short Q&A today. It's unfortunate, but I guess it is what it is. Um, I mean, I could talk about some of the other stuff that I'm working on, but if you guys really have no questions, okay. Um, I see a question here from Will. What does it say when you don't meet the criteria for POTS but still get dizziness when standing? That one is kind of easy, Will. So that is really orthostasis. You don't have to meet the criteria for POTS, which stands for postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, which has a specific criteria for diagnosis, such as your heart rate should increase by 30 beats or more when you go from a flat or supine position to a standing position or um, an upright position. And the key with POTS is not if your heart rate increases in the beginning. Everybody's heart rate increases in the beginning. In the first few seconds when you stand up, it's compensation. It's compensatory. It's supposed to. The key with POTS is that the heart rate increases and stays increased 10 minutes or after you've been upright. That's the key. Um, that's what makes the diagnosis for POTS. So really, if you don't make the diagnosis, if you haven't quite met the 30 beats per minute or more at 10 minutes, you could still have orthostasis for other reasons. It could still be from heart rate. It could also be from blood pressure. That is the blood pressure dropping. Um, and both can cause both dizziness and unsteadiness or even passing out and not meet the full criteria of POTS. I hope that answers your question well. Okay, we have a lot of more questions coming in right now. Let's go to the next one. And hang on here because it's really small. Sim is asking about double right-sided SGB block in the UK by a practitioner, experienced practitioner, ended up extremely anxiety and terror for a couple of weeks. What could be the reason? Well, for one thing, it sounds like you got the non-dominant side. Okay, so I see this every so often. So the trick is not to suffer there for several weeks. The trick is to do the other side as quickly as possible, so that you get your dominant side and get out of the extreme anxiety and terror. Because really what you're doing is when you block the non-dominant side, you're pushing the remainder impulses to the dominant side, so it's making things a lot worse. Normally, there's not really a whole lot. It doesn't really get much worse. Just not a whole lot happens, but occasionally I see people feeling extreme anxiety, or I guess just anxiety. I typically don't want people to deal with that for a couple of weeks. Your experienced practitioner should have known this and should have recommended the left side immediately or early on. But what can I say? That's the way I do it. The next question is from Jessica. Jessica B. Can I talk about ways to manage mucus and phlegm? So the mucus and phlegm, they come from sinuses, they come from your upper airway and even lower airway. Okay, it has to do with inflammation in that area. This is one of the reasons why I do the EAT procedure, the epipharyngeal abrasive therapy. You can also use a supplement such as NAC, N-acetylcysteine. It helps thin out mucus and phlegm. But ultimately, you need to get rid of the source of the inflammation in order for your body to stop making this protective mechanism, which is what mucus and phlegm is for. It's meant to protect your airway from these remnants and pathogens and everything like that. So here's a question by Nippy, and the question is about: is there any correlation between gut and numbness? I can't really think of any correlation between gut and numbness outside of a nutritional deficiency. For instance, if you were low in vitamin B1, for instance, or had too much B6, or had insufficient vitamin B12, those can potentially cause neuropathies of one type or another, and or even folate. But it won't specifically correlate to numbness per se, and none of the toxins typically can cause a neuropathy or numbness from the gut. So the only way I can think of that working would be through a nutritional deficiency. You can also probably make a case for excess histamine. If there's bacteria in your gut that are making too much histamine, or there's pathologic species making too much histamine, that can technically cause neuropathic-like symptoms. So it could work that way perhaps too. I hope that answers your question, Nippy. Jessica B. Why does exercise, even stretching or walking, cause an increase in symptoms? So when I first started this, I mentioned triggers. So triggers for exercise or for activity, whether it's physical activity or mental activity, most often linked with mitochondrial dysfunction. We're talking about having a low reserve to begin with. Think of like your battery. If you forgot to plug your phone in the night before and you wake up and your phone reads 15%, well, you're not going to be able to do a whole lot with that phone that day. You're going to have to leave it on the charger. Long COVID kind of works this way because COVID damages mitochondria. Okay, the mitochondria do not work well. They don't recycle, which is the mitophagy, which is what their normal repair process is to basically be recycled when they're damaged. You make new ones, or you create new cells with fresh mitochondria, and they have problems making energy. Okay, there's disruptions in the energy generation process. So between those two things, you have such a low reserve that when you try to do any amount of activity, it runs out. It runs out and your symptoms will increase until you stop and rest. Angela A asks, what are your thoughts on taking NAD plus for mitochondrial support? Well, let's talk about what NAD plus is. So NAD plus is a derivative from vitamin B3 niacin, okay? It is an electron carrier. So what it does is during the Krebs cycle or the citric acid cycle, as we're breaking down a fuel molecule, let's say a glucose molecule, which typically starts out as pyruvate and becomes acetyl-CoA. But as we're extracting energy from between each step of the Krebs cycle, the electrons have to go somewhere, and they go to NAD plus, and NAD plus becomes NADH. And this accumulates throughout the Krebs cycle, and then it goes to the electron transport chain. And now the electrons can be offloaded in exchange for pushing protons now from one part of the membrane out to the other, to the outer membrane of the mitochondria, and creating a gradient. So NAD plus has to have a ratio to NADH, okay? Yes, it can be helpful to take NAD plus. You can't take NAD plus orally. You can have it infused through an IV, or you can take one of the intermediates, which I typically prefer to have your body make the stuff as opposed to just infusing it. But if you need like a supercharged, that's the way to go. NMN and NR, nicotinamide, those are the precursors, and even just niacin, vitamin B3. All those serve as precursors to NAD plus, okay? So, and it's actually the NADH is what carries the energy, not the NAD plus. So there is some benefit to it, okay? If you're having issues with the electron transport mechanism. But what I find is it's not always that's the issue, okay? There may be an issue earlier on upstream with fatty acid metabolism. It may be shunting or having problems with beta oxidation. There's several different issues that can occur in long COVID. It's not always an NAD problem, okay? Let me see if we have any other questions. You're welcome, Nippy. All right. I guess here's a question from Scott and Kay. It's about the 10-7000 unit, which is a TENS machine. So these aren't obviously designed for vagus nerve stimulation. So these clips we're kind of not made for the unit, but we're using them with the unit. And I'm talking about the clips that attach to the ear. So they don't really make different sizes, unfortunately. But I do have some ideas. If you contact my office, I'll see if I can get you the right one. Okay. But the ones that are available over the counter, those unfortunately are one size. They don't make them larger or smaller. Okay. But I do have an idea. Dana King is asking me if I treat spike persistence without SGB. I see you have a nicotine protocol. So spike persistence, I guess I want to to define it a little better, we're not talking about a spikopathy, okay? That is that there's a ton of spike protein circulating in your bloodstream, okay? Spike protein is intracellular, okay? It's inside cells, it's inside your lysosomes. So you don't treat spike persistence with SGB. So that's not something you use an SGB for. Stellar ganglion block procedure is used to treat dysautonomia, okay? And dysautonomia will have additional problems downstream, such as neuroinflammation and immune system dysregulation that can also respond to a stellar ganglion procedure. But you don't treat a spike persistence with an SGB. You can there's a few things that I'm working on to help eliminate the spike, but I wanted to also talk about what doesn't work. And one of them is the spike detox protocols or the spike detox supplements that you see everywhere online. So they usually consist of three things: nattokinase, bromelain, and curcumin. Sometimes they have a few additional things. Don't get me wrong, these things are fine. Nattokinase is fine for endothelial dysfunction, for fibrinolysis, that is breaking apart clots. Bromelain also has some mild activity for that. These are both proteases. That means they break apart proteins, not spike proteins, any and all proteins, okay? And curcumin is an antioxidant. It's also anti-inflammatory. So there was one study showing nattokinase breaking up a spike protein in a petri dish, okay? But guess what? It doesn't really matter what you put in that petri dish. Nattokinase will break it down. You could try chicken, beef, pork, whatever you like. It's still going to break it down because that's what it does. It's a protein kinase. That doesn't mean that's what's actually happening inside your body, okay? It's very important. I hate for you guys to waste money and time on stuff that is unlikely to really work for what the claim is for, okay? So, but I am working on some things to help with getting rid of spike persistence. But remember, the spike is intracellular. It's inside your cells. It's inside lysosomes. So the strategy has to be very different than traditional detox programs, okay? As far as nicotine can help replace the ACE2 receptors. So when either COVID or a spike protein touches the spike, basically touches the ACE2 receptor, okay? It binds, this whole complex now gets sucked into the cell inside the lysosome. Now the ACE2 receptor doesn't get recycled back to the surface of the cell. It gets pretty much destroyed inside the lysosome. So what happens over time is you have less ACE2 receptors, and that can have a hemodynamic problem because ACE2 receptors, it also works as an enzyme, and it helps convert a substance called angiotensin into angiotensin 2. Now, angiotensin tends to increase your blood pressure, okay? It tends to squeeze down, actually it does what it sounds like, angio, blood vessel, tensin, tense. It makes your blood vessels squeeze down and increase your blood pressure. So it's not good to have a lot of angiotensin floating around in your bloodstream. So this receptor is supposed to convert it to angiotensin 2, okay, for breakdown. So if you don't have sufficient ACE2 receptors, that can wreak havoc on blood pressure management and hemodynamics in general, okay? So I think that's where the nicotine protocol comes into effect. Short term, you only need a couple of days worth. I'm not a big fan of these long-term nicotine protocol systems because it can also damage your endothelium over time, and your body quickly adjusts to nicotine so that it will reduce the number of receptors, and especially in your brain, and you'll have some withdrawal when you stop. So if you're going to do it, it has to be really short term, for a couple of days, and then take breaks in between, kind of thing. Okay. I hope that answers your question. Here's a question by Jessica B. Do I have any recommendations for someone who experiences prolonged and delayed recovery from viral infections? So I'm not sure if you mean like regular colds or flu, or do you mean like reactivation from Epstein-Barr virus or CMV or one of those, Jessica? So remember what I said, long COVID or during long COVID, you have immune dysregulation. That means that it's not suppressed and it's not overactive. It's just dysregulated, okay? That means it's not working the way it's supposed to be working. So that can certainly have problems with dealing with any pathogen, including viruses and bacteria. As far as reactivations, which we see, and so it's almost pathognomonic for long COVID, is if you see Epstein-Barr reactivated, you kind of be sure that you probably have long COVID. And that is because of this dysregulation. Epstein-Barr is normally a latent herpes family virus. It's in the same family as chickenpox virus, the varicella virus, and even the herpes simplex viruses 1 and 2, and the CMV virus, the cytomegalovirus. All of these are in the same category. There's other herpes family viruses like HHV6, 7, and 8. And but basically, these viruses, once they get in your system, they never leave. They become permanently part of our cells, and they have a latent phase, which means they go to sleep. They don't replicate. They don't cause any trouble. But during a stressful event or during a trigger, they can reactivate and start replicating again. Each of these viruses do different things. So I hope that sort of answers your question, Jessica. But since I'm not sure if you're talking about just regular viruses that we see all the time, like colds and flu, or are we talking about these reactivations that are causing a problem? But so I'm not sure kind of what to recommend, since I'm not sure which one you mean. All right. So I think we'll be wrapping it up shortly. We kind of have I guess a lower turnout this time compared to other Q&As I run. I run these once a month. I do them on a Sunday. I'm volunteering for these. Of course, I could be spending my Sunday in bed, sipping coffee, but I choose to come out here and help you guys out because I think it's helpful, or at least I thought it was helpful. Um, so, all right, I'll answer these last two questions, and I think that we're going to be wrapping it up. This is from Nippy. So yes, cold sore virus is basically herpes simplex virus. Depending on where it is, it's 1 or 2. And yes, it can reactivate due to long COVID. It really has nothing to do with the gut or numbness. It has to do with the dysregulated immune system. And like I said, it's much easier to trigger these herpes viruses because they tend to be latent. And with this dysregulated immune system, they can easily reactivate even with little triggers. Okay. All right, guys, take it easy. I hope we'll see a better turnout next time. And I'll see you in a month. Just a reminder, I will be doing a Q&A for the European groups on 8/8 at 8 a.m. Central Standard. And I won't be the host there. Somebody else will. But you guys are welcome to come if you like. And I'll see you in the month. Okay, I'll see you next month, last Sunday of the month.